You used to be strong. You looked straight, spoke the truth. You didn't avoid. You didn't need permission to exist. But when did you start staying silent just to avoid conflict? When did you start apologizing even when you weren't wrong, just to keep the atmosphere from getting colder? When did you start doing everything around the house as a reflex, without needing thanks? When did you stop feeling that you were worthy? You're not weak. You're just too tired to keep defending yourself in the very home you built. You are still the pillar, still responsible, still enduring, but deep inside, something is quietly wearing away. She doesn't scold you. The kids don't complain. Everything is fine. But you no longer feel fine. You feel yourself shrinking not in the eyes of others, but in your own self-respect. You slowly stop reacting when you're disrespected. You no longer get angry, no longer ask, "Where am I?" You just quietly keep going as if that's the default price of a man in marriage. I understand. Because I used to think, being a good husband means staying silent, giving in, and sacrificing until there's nothing left to keep for yourself. But at some point, you have to stop, not to place blame, but to ask yourself, do I still exist as a man, or am I just a shadow keeping the family from falling apart? If that question has ever crossed your mind, then this video isn't a story, it's a mirror. And maybe it's time for you to look into it and start returning to yourself. You used to be a man who knew exactly who you were, not the loud type, but a man with opinions, with his own space, and with boundaries that didn't need to be spoken. You liked playing guitar on Saturday nights. You went jogging every Sunday morning. You never missed coffee with your close friends. Small things, but enough to keep you feeling whole. Then you got married. There was no major event, no big argument that broke you down. Just, little by little, you adjusted yourself to fit, to keep the peace, to make her happy. The first guitar session got cancelled because she frowned when you said you'd be home late. You thought, it's okay, I can play next week. The Sunday morning jog was skipped because she needed you to drive her to the supermarket. You thought, no big deal. The get-together with old friends was postponed, then cancelled because of a party at her family's place. You sent a message to apologize. No one blamed you, but no one invited you again either. You called it putting family first. She called it maturity. Your friends called it disappearing. You still thought you were doing the right thing because every time she was upset, you felt you had to try harder. Every time she was disappointed, you asked yourself, what am I not doing enough of? Gradually, you stopped pushing back when you disagreed. You stopped sharing your opinions when you felt differently. You stopped arguing not because you were wrong, but because you feared the cold silence that followed. And then, on an ordinary afternoon like any other, you apologized for forgetting to buy the dish soap she preferred, for letting the kids stay up 15 minutes late, for not folding the towel in the right spot. You apologized for small things repeatedly, steadily, like a reflex. And the scariest part was, you didn't even realize you were apologizing anymore. Marriage didn't kill you with a hammer blow to your pride. It killed you with a needle. One prick a day, gentle, deep, not enough to make you cry out, but enough so that every morning when you woke up, you felt a little more tired, not in your body, but in that fading sense of, who am I? No one told you, you're wrong. But every time she fell silent, you assumed you were. No one asked you to give up the guitar, give up running, give up your friends. But you did, believing that's what made her feel loved. You were wrong. Love didn't ask you to give up yourself. But the fear of losing love, that's what quietly made you do it. No one saw you disappearing, because you still smiled, still talked, still played the role of husband and father. It's just that the man who once had confidence, who once was clear, who once had his own boundaries now stands further back, hands gripping the steering wheel, back slightly hunched, and when he looks in the rearview mirror, he's no longer sure who's driving his life anymore. Not because you're too weak, but because you loved too much, and you thought that to love was to endure. But you didn't realize that what you were enduring was the erosion of yourself, day by day, hour by hour, in silence. The argument didn't explode. No yelling, no smashing things. Just what seemed like an ordinary conversation. But later, he realized that was the moment when everything began to change quietly and permanently. She said, I don't want to have to remind you. I want you to know what to do on your own. That sentence seemed harmless, but for a man who was used to clarity, clarity about right and wrong, clarity about whose responsibility was whose, clarity that feelings should be shared in words, that sentence felt like a soft blade, cutting through his pride without blood, but painful. From that day on, he no longer lived by his usual routine. He lived by the instincts of someone trying to read moods, guessing she was upset, guessing what she needed, guessing what should be done first to avoid that disappointed look, or the long silence. He didn't do things because they were asked of him. He did them out of fear, fear of being blamed, fear of the heavy atmosphere, fear that if he didn't do things right, the love would grow cold and it would be his fault. Little by little, he couldn't tell the difference anymore between being proactive and being submissive, between caring and being afraid, between I want to do this and I have to do this. And the worst part was, he thought that was maturity. He told his friends, I know what she needs before she even says it. He was proud of his ability to anticipate everything until he realized he no longer had a voice in his own home. He had become a quiet version of a family assistant, an efficient shadow, but invisible. Bit by bit, he lost his sense of self. He stopped arguing, not because he agreed, but because he no longer had the strength to have a dialogue. He always took the blame, not because he was wrong, but because blame was the fastest way to end the tension. From a partner, he gradually became a background figure for his wife's emotions. No one said it out loud, but he knew that in this relationship, he was the one keeping the balance, and the price of peace was himself. In the world of teenagers, simp is a joke, a slang term for boys who pour themselves out for someone who doesn't care. But in the world of grown men, simp isn't just a joke. It's a diagnosis, silent, persistent, and sometimes even he doesn't realize he has it. A man who trades his self-respect to keep someone else happy. That's the truest, shortest, and bitterest definition. No one forced him to do it. There was no contract making him give until he was empty. But he still did. He gave gifts not because of special occasions, but because he felt he was falling short of something even though no one said so. He cleaned the house before anyone asked, because he was afraid that if he didn't, that disappointed look would appear again. He apologized even when he wasn't at fault, because just one, I'm sorry, would bring peace to the household. He stopped making suggestions, stopped making decisions. He waited for others to nod before acting, like a little boy asking permission to exist in the house he built. He didn't feel insulted, because everything happened in silence. No words of blame. Just distance, disappointment, the absence of that proud look from his partner, and so he kept trying to make up for it in any way he could. Until one day, he realized he was no longer a husband. He was the background, a solid, pleasant background, causing no trouble, making no demands, having no strong feelings, needing no understanding, having no dreams of his own. The worst part was, he thought he was doing the right thing, that this was what a decent man should do. But being a decent man doesn't mean being a faded man. No one told him, you're losing yourself, because even he didn't realize it until he had gone too far. Since he was a boy, he was taught that being a man means sacrifice, sacrificing sleep, sacrificing feelings, sacrificing personal time. He had to be strong, had to endure, had to put others first. A good man is one who doesn't complain, even when he's tired. An ideal husband is one who is always ready to step back so others can step forward, and he believed that. He entered marriage like a soldier ready for battle, but not to fight anyone to protect. He didn't ask for anything for himself. Whatever she wanted, he tried to provide. When she was tired, he took on more. When she was angry, he stayed silent. When she needed something, he dropped all his personal plans. He didn't feel he was losing out, because deep down he thought, that's what a man should do. But no one told him, sacrifice too much, and it will become the default, and once it's the default, it will no longer be appreciated. It will become the floor, silent, steady. But no one bends down to say thank you. She wasn't wrong, not ungrateful, not cruel. She just got used to him taking care of everything. And when one day he was tired, wanted to breathe, wanted to pause for a bit, she was surprised, as if facing a stranger. Because the man she knew was always fine, always endured, always needed nothing. The relationship gradually turned into a silent contest, where one person kept giving endlessly, and one person judged the level of good husband based on her satisfaction. But he wasn't a victim. No one tied his hands. No one forced him to give up himself. He was the one who allowed it to happen. He thought stepping back was love, but it turned out it was retreating from himself. There's a special feeling that only men who have lost themselves truly understand. It's not sadness, it's not anger, it's not despair either. It's a kind of emotional numbness. Everything still happens, work, family, responsibilities, but inside, it feels like a thin layer of ice covers it all. He no longer feels joy in success, no longer feels regret when he misses out on something, no longer feels that he deserves to be loved just for being himself. Every morning when he wakes up, he doesn't hate life. It's just, nothing makes him want to get out of bed. Nothing excites him anymore. No more dreams, No more inner voice. He does everything right, but no longer feels it's right. He smiles at his child, talks to his wife, joins every meal, but it's as if he's playing someone else. This feeling isn't as intense as depression. It's slower, lighter, but persistent, like a small wound that never heals. Like a door closed quietly, not locked, but he doesn't want to walk through it. He no longer gets angry. He just has nothing left to feel. And then, on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon, driving his daughter and her friend to the mall, he hears a sentence that cuts through all his inner defenses. A real simp, the kids giggle in the back seat. He doesn't know what simp means. But when he hears his daughter explain, when he understands that it's a word for men who give everything hoping for love, but get nothing in return, he feels a chill run down his spine. Not because his daughter was wrong, but because she was frighteningly right. He wasn't spineless, he wasn't foolish. He was just a man who once loved with everything and quietly lost piece after piece of himself, until he no longer knew when he had changed. That sentence, unintentional, innocent, became the first mirror in a long time that made him look at himself again. He no longer saw the man who once dreamed, once lived by principles, once loved fiercely. He saw a quiet man who knew how to please, how to dodge, how to stay silent, but no longer knew who he was. And from that moment, seeing his daughter turn back and smile, he understood. If he didn't do something right now, then one day, his own daughter would choose a man as gentle as he was, and in the end, no longer see him as worth holding on to. Number. The way out isn't to leave the woman beside you. It isn't to smash everything and walk away like a loser. It isn't to reverse all the sacrifices you made just to prove you were once too good. The way out sometimes is simply to return to yourself, because you don't need to leave the marriage. You just need to return to being the man she once fell in love with. Not with flowers, not with money, not with silence, but with the full presence of a man with boundaries, with principles, and with a soul of his own. You need to set limits again. Not to fight anyone, but to remind yourself, I don't live to please, I live to be true. You need to relearn how to say no without feeling guilty. Learn how to say, today I need time for myself, without fearing punishment through silence. You need to act not to be loved, but because you love. Because true love doesn't require you to wear yourself down. It needs two people standing strong together, no one having to shrink themselves so the other feels whole. You don't need to be fully understood, but you need to be respected as an individual, as an equal partner. From now on, live like a man with self-worth. A man who knows what he's doing today, why he's doing it, and doesn't need anyone's permission for his feelings to exist. You don't need anger. You don't need to rebel. You just need to stand tall quietly and patiently gather back the pieces of yourself you left scattered over the years. Because if you don't hold on to yourself, no one, not even the woman living with you, can do it for you. No one takes away a man's self-respect. No one steals his dreams, his feelings, or his identity. He puts them down himself little by little, to keep a relationship from cracking, to keep the woman he loves from leaving, to keep the house warm with voices. But by the time we realize, if we've kept love but lost ourselves, then that love isn't worth keeping anymore. A man doesn't need to be loud to be seen. He just needs to stop at the right moment and ask himself one seemingly simple question: am I still myself, or just someone playing the role of who I used to be? If you've ever lived like that, ever sacrificed so much that you forgot what you once liked, what you once dreamed of, who you once were, then don't stay silent anymore. Leave a comment. I choose to reclaim myself. Because sometimes the journey back doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to begin with you, right now.